How are you doing?
I'm so excited to get to hang out with you on this special day of days.
This is a day of days. It is special, and I am very excited to be here to get to talk about this journey and to do it with you. I mean, with your background and what you've done, it's always great the conversations we can have about this stuff.
Yeah, you and I connect like puzzle pieces. So, um, this is launch day for Ryan's new game, and I'm so excited to hear about it. I've seen clips, but first, what we're going to do is get into the background of how Ryan came to develop this game. And in particular, we're going to talk about this weird thing called memory reconsolidation. And my background is in psych and neuroscience. I have a graduate degree in behavioral neuroscience. And one of the things any neuroscientist studies is how memory works. And it's pretty mind blowing how memory works. We've only just scratched the surface in science, but we do know some things. It's very distributed and it can change. Memories are not fixed things. Memories are attached to other things like emotions. You probably know that yourself just when you think about things. In fact, emotion is one of the greatest triggers to get a memory to be stored. Just one moment. I'm going to make Scott the full host so
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't
So, I mean,
hear
you
everything.
said
But yeah,
so
talk to
many
us a
important
little
things
about
there
that.
about that. Absolutely. I mean, you're right on. I think the most important thing you said that'll be a big part of how we talk today is we think we know how memories work, and we keep getting closer with more and more information, more and more data. So, we kind of stand on the shoulders of amazing research and conjecture, and we kind of take it the next level and take it the next level. And interestingly, video games are probably now showing us the path to how some of this works, because what we're going to talk about sometimes gets called the Tetris effect, which is really interesting, but not everybody's known to attach it that way. It's what we believe was really the founding principle, or the functional principle behind EMDR therapies, which has been an interesting path. If you go look at EMDR, they thought it was a lot about doing tapping or following along with a certain, and it turned out that it had much more to do with sort of a visual spatial interference kind of situation where you could reassociate the memories. And that's exactly the things you're saying that is right. We're neuroplastic. And I think we're finding out more and more than ever. Our memories are very perception based, which is something we have to learn and be careful of. And they're malleable and they change over time. And certain events can change them in one direction or another. And that's really a lot of what, we're excited about, when we think about those kind of mental health concerns that are tied a lot to how we respond to a stimulus. So these are not necessarily the schizophrenias or the bipolar sort of stuff where you are dealing with a chemical imbalance that is a chemical imbalance that is, when we talk about those things are like that are anxiety, stress related, those kind of ideas. In our particular case, we focus specifically on mental health and stress related issues with mental health related stress, that this plasticity gives us opportunity to reframe how we feel about a situation we have experienced, and kind of reposition it. So it's an awesome conversation to have. It's an amazing conversation to have with you. And the team that has been working behind this. I mean, our lead game designer, Jeffrey Sang, is he also, I think you understand. You and him have worked together, and he lives in this place too. He is a functional behavioral scientist. As you were both actually a behavioral scientist, and then you've also been a functional behavioral scientist. And that's what's really interesting. Also, I think about the masters in game design, the folks that have been doing what you've been doing, what Jeffrey's been doing for all these periods of time. Shahid Ahmad, who's worked on this, and Yen Wang. So these are like originators of some of the first video games all the way back to Commodore 64. Yen's work was in Descent, and then all the way into World of Warcraft and all that kind of stuff. All of you guys have figured out that there are ways to attach emotions to previous memories, and that's what we're seeing. And these consolidations are reformulation of these memories in amazing ways.
So let's clearly define memory consolidation, reconsolidation for everybody, because I want them to understand. But before I do, hey folks, Have you ever had EMDR therapy or maybe heard of it? And I forget what EMDR stands for. Scott, maybe you could look that up and type it in. But if anybody's had EMDR, type it into the chat. By the way, I have. Yep, I see some folks. Yes. So you know what we're talking about. So for those who don't, EMDR therapy is a type of therapy where the therapist gets the client to re-experience past traumas, bring them into the present. And the EMDR therapist does something to distract the client visually that, in theory, gets the memory to be not as potent, not as triggering. It recontextualizes the memory with a different way of looking at it, with different emotions, with they can't hurt you now. There's all different therapeutic interventions, but the key of EMDR is that at least so when I had it, my therapist used her fingers and she went back and forth in a rhythmic motion and had me follow it with my eyes. Anyone who's ever seen an old-timey vaudeville person do, hypnosis with a stopwatch, with a watch on a string, same idea, same intervention, which is if you talk and the person is experiencing strong emotions and there's this distraction going on with their visual and motor systems, which is the eyes following. The idea is then you can reconsolidate the memory and essentially restore it with different emotions and different assumptions attached. That's my understanding. Does that map to what you understand, Ryan?
Yeah, so it's eye movement desensitization, but the interesting thing about it is they got deeper into it. Is the eye movements themselves didn't end up being that critical. So later on, they started adding tapping. Then they moved the tapping away, and I think and now one of the thoughts is that it's actually the therapist that is the visual spatial interference. It's that direct contact with another person's face and the way you're reading it in a very uh, strong moment of vulnerability where you're very deeply triggered into an event that's happened. So to jump into this idea of consolidation of memories, what we're seeing more and more now is understanding that memories are pieced together with various neural pathways. So you said it really, really well. There's what you remember about something, and then there's what you feel about it or what you remember feeling about it. And one of the reasons it got called the Tetris effect is this: there was a major, not in size, but in implication, a major study around Tetris, where there have been these folks that had been in car accidents and they were brought into the hospital and they were fine enough that they were the ones that were filling out the accident report. And they broke them off into two cohorts. One group just filled out the accident report. The other group played Tetris for 20 minutes while they thought about what they were going to put in the accident report. And then they filled out the accident report. And they followed these folks longitudinally, and they had 62% less post-traumatic stress disorder as a net result of that situation, right? It was a remarkable sort of qualification of what a lot of people have been feeling about certain types of games over periods of time, that if you were in a visually spatially distracted, so you were given some way to be distracted and you were reconstructing these memories, it wasn't that you were going to forget what happened to you, but you could associate a new feeling to what had happened. And that could overwrite as what we'll call the primary memory, or the way that you would feel that going forward. Does that match how you feel about it as well? And as a good description for folks?
Yeah, we have an interesting comment that came in from YouTube, from Shahid Ahmad. He
He's
says,
one of our lead developers,
thank you,
and
Shahid. He says, this is what the Oxford study was. Tetris on PTSD sufferers showed 50% reduction in flashbacks. So this is exciting, amazing, challenging. And I think it brings up something I learned about science in grad school, that I used to think science was truth. Science is a bunch of hypotheses that get shifted and refined over time. Is it the fingers? Maybe not. But I remember when I got EMDR, and I hope during the Q&A, all you folks who also got EMDR, let's talk about it a little more. But when I got EMDR, my therapist was doing the fingers and it didn't really work on me. I was 3 years into therapy and kind of ready to leave. She
Mhm.
had a daughter going to college and didn't want me to leave. And so she had just learned EMDR and we were doing EMDR, but it was fascinating. But then recently, a very close friend of mine who had, unfortunately, a violent childhood with an alcoholic parent, had a lot of change in her life, and these emotions came up for her again. And she went to her trauma therapist again for more EMDR. And she told me her trauma therapist did tapping, like you said. So
Mhm.
there's no one way, right?
There's no
What?
one way, there's no one answer. I would also imagine in your case, I mean, by the way, we should always back up and say, we're amazed when a therapy works 20% of the time in mental health. That is like a smack out of the park. So this is why when games have been effective in these levels, in these studies, in these early studies, have shown glimmers of effectiveness, has really raised our attention because you don't get 50% disassociation of a stress moment or 62% of folks not having an issue. These are not normal numbers, whether you're in talk therapies or you're involving medications. And, that has always had us super, just super engaged and excited from the time that we were doing our work. My background being in light therapy, as you know, from, years back, and then from neurostimulation. These are big numbers, right? And what I was going to say is, I wonder aloud when you say it didn't work for you, you were somebody who was very visual in the work that you had done and those sorts of things as well. I don't know if that would have been enough stimulus necessarily for you as well. And we also know this other thing, you just said something really important, and I think this is really key. We've noticed in the treatment of things like stress that perception becomes reality as well. If you didn't perceive your therapist to have a high degree of efficacy, that would have also been on mind while you're trying to do these things. And that gets consolidated or attached to what's going on as well. Could either be interference from the creation of the new memories or part of them in a way that um, it doesn't feel like there's the authenticity you need for adoption of those things. So it's a complicated mechanism, but and certainly I know of some people that swear by it. I know other folks. I've
Oh,
also
yeah.
had EMDR. It was not the most functional part of the therapy I went through either. But when I saw the new papers coming out that were detaching it from the motion and thinking about these other levels of interference that you can provide by having people in a much more immersed environments, that's where the game team really took off and thought about that from a stress perception.
Exactly. And I know for myself, you're making a really important point, which is not every therapy works for every person or every person at a certain point in their life, right? Where
That's right.
they're at, what they need. But I know for myself, Tetris is probably far more effective than EMDR. I personally use casual games, especially match three games, to chill out, to turn my mind off, to relax at the end of the day. And from doing a lot of games research, I know that a ton of people do. Hey, everybody in the chat, does anybody else use games to change their mood? Type it. If you use games to change your mood, let us know. Amen. So Sharon, yeah, awesome. Yes. Uh, so a lot of us know just anecdotally from our own personal experience that games can 100% alter your mood, alter your feelings. They can also get in the way if you use them too much. I have had to take many games off my hard drive because I was fully addicted, waking up at 4 a.m,
Yeah, I was
sneaking
going
out
to
of
say, as soon as
bed.
we're interrupting with sleep and it's moving into different areas, then we see it's actually really cool studies have
That's the
shown
U-shaped curve that you and I keep talking about,
it
right?
is.
It's
And
good until it's bad.
after we started talking more about that, I went out and did some more research, and the team did some more research as well. And we dug into this really fascinating body of research. This has been posted on LinkedIn not that long ago. That games were super effective for stress relief and for getting you to reassociate and de-stress from situations that you dealt with in the past until you were using them as a hiding place or they were interrupting your sleep. Those two things, if they became a coping mechanism in the short term through the distraction, very, very positive. And then some of the goal and achievement sides of the game started to reshape self-perception, very powerful. But if they were truly an avoidance technique and they were truly a habit, they didn't have those effects. And as a matter of fact, at some point that could actually reverse the effects.
Exactly. And that's true of every efficacious drug. Too much of it doesn't work. So that's something I think we all manage. Michael says, sometimes I play my guitar. I love that. Music, I wish I did that more. I used to play a lot, but music is a really great way to calm yourself down and change your mood, right? And then you're like, wow, I was bummed, but I feel okay now. So I think any creative outlet can really change your mood, and a lot of great creativity has come from people in bad moods trying to change them. So let's talk about your game, because this is what you've been pursuing. Now, you guys have been tweaking and tuning this thing for how long?
Well, so I mean, DeepWell's been around for 3.5 years. As you advocate, you start with concept storyboards and move yourself along, but a functional version of this thing has existed for over 2 years. It's needed a lot of dialing in. As we get into it, you're going to find there are new game mechanics in here, supported by therapeutic mechanisms. A lot of them borrow from the things that have been super effective in other games: distraction modes and levels of achievement and accomplishment, precision, rhythm. These things we borrowed from games that had already been really effective. And then we added a breath feedback mechanism that comes through a toning mechanic and started mixing that in as well. But we had to do it in a way that was germane to the game. So this game, Zengence, you're a mage and you have powers. And to draw on those powers, you can draw on them in various ways. You don't have to call on yourself vocally, but if you call on yourself vocally, it frees your hands up to use both of your guns and to fire your magic and to control all of these things that are going on around you. And that is some of the other constructs of it as well. It's an action game. It has shooting components, and there's research reasons for why we did that. It turns out that visual-spatial interference, that place that gets you really heavily engaged, and those games that have been super effective at changing people's perceptions, and some of these consolidations of memories that we believe might be associated back to this, have a lot to do with action type games. There's also been a lot of data, and we do a lot of talking about this, and you and I actually met on a panel where the active debate was about violence in video games. And I want to be really clear on this point at the moment. Violence in video games does not beget real world violence. The data is out. It is shown over and over and over and over again. But we also have talked about, in those states when you're highly engaged and highly dopaminergic, what you hear in your ear, so free and unmoderated chat, the exchanges that are happening in those moments, those can be radicalizing for people. So, we've gotten confused about what parts of the game can do what. A shooting mechanic is a very positive mechanic. We chose to stay away from gore and blood and guts and all those things. But even when you got into those situations, for some people, that was actually more therapeutic, believe it or not. And, it was something we didn't choose to do, but that worked out. But in any case, it never led to greater levels of violence or any association back to gun violence and stuff like that. So this was one of those things that the team leaned deeply into. A lot of folks had tried to, consciously make these games that are good for you, but they've also felt like maybe they had one hand tied behind their back because some of the research had suggested that some of the most powerful game mechanics couldn't be used. It looks like that's not the case, that we very much can do those things.
So tell us about the game.
All right. So Zengence is, for all accounts, it's a VR game. It's available now on MetaQuest. Today is the launch date, and it's the first action video game that is designed to boost mental health. There's never been anything like it. It's also the first time that Meta has put a game with a therapeutic bent into their game store. So it plays as a game. It is a game, and it has this novel and embedded breath feedback technology but it's heavily involved in the gameplay that makes you more powerful. And then that hits off also on this really cool thing that we've been bouncing off of that we're calling intrinsic haptics. So because the VR is so immersive to start with, as you can imagine, you get in there and you already feel like you're in this environment. And then you start to use your power through toning. So we make a sound, and that brings up additional power. And that actually is a way that we can get you to do breath work without realizing you're doing it while you're involved with these rhythmic based situations, shooting, timing, planning, achieving, scoring, and also, setting yourself up for that level of visual spatial interference and engagement that has been shown to really reconsolidate memories, change ideas, and stuff like that. So we've put all that together in a way that we ask you to make these tones in times where you're actually at higher levels of what I'd say moments of stress. And we're looking really to get you to associate and more on a limbic level. We want your body to feel the reduction of stress in that moment. And with the internal haptics, the idea that you can actually feel in your lungs that you're doing this work, we want you to reconsolidate that memory in a way that this becomes part of what you do under more stressful situations. So the game has these two balancing points. You can go in there and de-stress and get a level of calm going. And it measures how you breathe and how you move and your precision and your timing to rhythm, and it shows you all of those things. And then it also works on the idea of building some resilience over time. And what we're looking for and what we're seeing in those of us that have been working on it for a while, and this has happened to me now, is that we're looking for it to be almost precognitive. When you hit another stressful situation down the road, you don't think to yourself, oh, now's my time to do the things that I learned in this game. It's not that kind of learning. It's the stuff you just start doing. So
When you say breath work, what do
yeah.
you mean?
Well, I mean, so I'm talking about vagal nerve stimulation, right? But I'm talking about it in a very different way. This is like, think about it as a walking, waking, very vigorous, but still meditative state in its own ways. And so we're having you work your breath up, but we didn't want to talk to you about your breath in the middle of doing this kind of work and this kind of stuff. Instead, we wanted to incorporate it as a game mechanic, something you would play through and use when you want to. You also can disable it and keep just playing it, and you can bring it back on when you're ready to do it again, because some people actually feel it so much they need to keep playing the game and take a little bit of a break from it for a while. We also adjusted it. So a brand new and interesting adjustment is we found that not everybody wanted to breathe the same way while they were doing that. So this was part of having the game out early and kind of moving through. They found different ways to set the toning mechanic up. So you can choose in the timing to the song how long you breathe in, how long you breathe out. And we can tell that you're breathing out just by the sound you make. So if you think about a tone, a vagal nerve tone, like a hum or a chorus or even singing, that's a sound you can only make when you're exhaling. So it became really easy for us to ask you to do that in certain times of the gameplay, and for us to have a sense of where your breath rate was at, or to set it for target, or to change it in certain ways while we were asking you to do a lot of other processing jobs and management of these various things that were going on around you. But we just want you to perceive it as, you see a thing, you're reacting to that thing. You see a thing, you're reacting to that thing. I'm dodging, I'm moving, I'm shooting on beat, I'm making a sound in time, or singing or chanting or humming along, and putting that into a sequence and in a way that was engaging, drew you in. And what happened with that internal haptics is the more we had to move and breathe, the more we felt like the power was really coming from us. And that brings in that other interesting thing about consolidation of memories. One of the other theories out there is that we already know that simulation and game-based simulation can have real-world impact. We've seen that, in dealing with people that have phobias and stuff like that, time and time again. But the thought here is that the more real that feels to your brain doesn't really say, oh, this is a simulation or this is real. If it feels as if that work you're doing is work you're really doing, there's a higher likelihood of adoption of those new behaviors. So it looks like a path to accelerating resilience as well, which is really exciting for us.
So this, for me, brings up why you're in VR versus doing a mobile game. What is it about VR that increases the therapeutic value?
I think early on, I mean, a couple of things. We're in VR for a couple of really important reasons. One, and I don't want to take this off the table, is, they were Facebook actually when we started the relationship. Meta now, they were folks that were really willing to explore with us the idea that therapy could be a real game. This could be a game, and to open up to that opportunity. We're also in VR because we were looking for that maximally immersive environment, and certainly when we were thinking about stimulation, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these things that aren't even games. Like there's things out right now for treatment of agoraphobia and stuff like that that get people to step outside of their homes, and they are in a virtual home and they're just as nervous in that moment than they are. So it was the combination of the distraction component and the ability to do the simulation and to push towards immersion were reasons why we chose this platform. We also chose it because today, Zengence is for mental health related stress, but these are mechanisms of action that we want to take into other therapeutics as well, into things that would be more doctor guided for mental health over time. We're working with the FDA to understand how we do that. And it looks like the VR headsets and the VR therapeutics are going to be the first reimbursable things as well. So we seem not as accessible because, mobile, everybody's got a mobile phone, but we actually were playing for what we think 3 to 5 years looks like from now. It's very clear that the FDA will not be reimbursing on mobile phones because there's rules about or not the FDA, they don't reimburse, but the FDA won't be clearing, and we won't be seeing mobile apps quickly reimbursed or the phone itself, the hardware, because there's a rule about reimbursement that if the piece of hardware can be repurposed outside of therapeutic use, it's much harder to get it cleared. They have around VR, the FDA has kind of opened their head about it. So have folks around reimbursement, and you see them starting to understand this as a piece of durable medical equipment, and that was another big reason to think about using it. That being said, I mean, our lead game designer, Jeff, is a big mobile person, and he's very much pushing for. And I'll tell you, there is a companion app that we've built that we play with internally and stuff like that. That's just on your phone. You just throw your headset on, and so you don't get the dodging and weaving to the same level, but you still get the idea that you can tone to elicit your power, and it certainly also is effective. But yeah, the immersive environment has been unreal for delivering this. Certainly early on, when you don't know exactly what mechanic is going to do what, you want to throw as much at it as you possibly can to try to get that effect that you're looking for.
Wow. Can't wait for the studies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've done our meta-analysis and like I said, I've been working with the FDA through predicate devices and stuff like that. And then we've got grant applications got amazing medical advisory board that's run by Dr. Sam Brown, pediatric neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, and Lisa Marin, who is a top-level psychologist, actually, helped construct the psychology program at OHSU, and Dr. Austin Peck, who is one of the first people to ever commercialize games for rehab and therapeutic use, is on our team. Dr. Justin Sitzma, and just a host of Dr. Julia Scott, who is literally a brain scientist. Like, these folks all came together, and they did something really amazing too that I think is big to the DeepWell culture. The biggest thing that I'm proud of for us in the medical world is we recognized the therapeutic potential of anything we were doing was tied to the engagement, and therefore we had to work in service of the game developer. And I think we'd seen too many times before in the gamification modes that maybe that had gone the wrong way around, where someone had showed up with a therapeutic mechanism, said, now make this a game. And that missed on what you teach so much about, right? Is, it's making a game is an incredibly hard thing, and finding
so hard.
Oh my God. And then if you don't even understand what it is that you're off to go do, and you show up and you're like, gamify this, well, all they can really do is put secondary game mechanics around it, badging, scoring, social, but it doesn't have the primary play loops. The things that I would imagine in your work, and as Jeff explains to me and what I've watched, are 90% of the work. They weren't necessarily there.
That is a lot. So do you have a little clip or demo or art or anything to show us from the game that you'd like to share?
I'm not sure how I would do that easily from here right now. There is all of that is on DeepWell's website, DeepWell DTx.
Great. So we'll share the link in the chat, here in Zoom, and also on YouTube.
And you saw my LinkedIn post this morning. That's actually me playing, which is why it's grainy. I want to be really careful because the artists work considerably off this. So don't think of that as the art, but you can see how involved, how much I'm moving and moving around and stuff like that. So it's there's quite a bit out to go see, and there's a really nice trailer on Oculus. You don't have to have an Oculus headset. If you just go to Meta, they'll show you all those trailers from Meta as well. So
Amazing. Yeah. Scott shared in the chat that the reviews on the Quest store are amazing. You guys should go check that out, particularly those of you with a Quest. And I'm being gifted a Quest shortly for giving a talk.
nice.
Yeah, with you're and my friend Nanea Reeves.
Yeah,
She wants to get a Quest in my hand, and she's also playing in this space,
absolutely.
Trip. So I'll just mention for the folks listening, VR is not nearly as accessible as other platforms. It's got problems. It's
Mhm.
also very interesting, but there's a pattern in that so many of the most successful digital therapeutics are either in VR or migrating there. You have Trip VR, which is an amazing app that's iterated a lot and changed to really
Mhm,
work
mhm,
better and better. You
mhm,
also have the work Jillian Ahrens, who was our guest a few weeks ago, is doing at Realized Care with chronic pain patients in VR
mhm, mhm.
applications.
Very good application for this. Very good. Like, the data
Yeah,
on chronic
right?
pain has been amazing. I mean, again, back to that distraction alone, that distraction capability is out of this world. Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that time and time again. I'm certainly folks have gravitated to that space. I think you're also seeing folks like Headspace have just launched a VR app after having a long time being mobile. And I think part of what they're doing is they're following where they think the reimbursement is going to be at some point too, right? Which is really important. There's different ways of accessibility. We went for, being as low cost as we could while doing the things that we needed to do and not needing a prescription. That was our early reach. And eventually we'll see ourselves move into more like mobile spaces and stuff like that. Other folks are thinking, well, okay, we're going to be dealing with higher levels of severity of disease and stuff like that. You might need to get the doctor, but we want to get it so you get paid back for doing it. My thing has always from light therapy, we're going to work over the counter for as long as we possibly can because there's so many hidden costs to something, even when it's reimbursed, and it does eliminate a lot of folks that can otherwise access something. You got to have the doctor, you got to get the script, you got to have the insurance. So we're trying to. I think everybody's finding their place where they can bring a little something more to kind of construct this world. And yeah, Linnea is an early leader in this for sure.
Absolutely. Pioneer. I love that the graphics are blocky and simple. And let me tell you why. First of all, Minecraft showed all of us that you don't have to have fancy graphics and super fancy onboarding to
Mm-hmm.
have something compelling. I can remember a lot of my game design peers, the people I looked up to were poo-pooing Minecraft. Oh my God, that's the
Mm-hmm.
ugliest thing. Look at that. That's so stupid. And here we are, right? But that's a core of the work that I do with teams is get them to test their ideas and develop their ideas and develop those core gaming loops that we were talking about with really simple graphics. And the reason is if you show people beautiful graphics, you get false positives. They're beautiful, right? But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it hides real feedback on the mechanic itself, on the experience itself, on the value prop.
I think
And
low poly is gorgeous. The work these folks did on the shadowing and the build of those worlds. And when you're working in that VR environment specifically, I mean, overhead is the conversation over and over and over again. We've got more mechanics going on than the average game, and we're asking you to do things in time, which means the processor has to move a certain way at a certain time. So at first I was like, oh, as someone like you're saying, I was maybe thinking, oh, why would we go low poly? But as they brought it to life, I was blown away. And it's also so peaceful in there. I mean, there's something about, and there's part of the game that actually manages overstimulation too. It's why we bring the precision component into it. We found even with exercise and motion, which is also incorporated in the game, some people get the runner's high, some people get sort of over jazzed, right? So these things that can also keep us at sort of that in between state really mattered. And that in combination with the music, which was like expertly selected and it's beautiful. The music in here, there's some great artists that we're involved with, and we're all designed in a way to keep you in this moderate space. And so, yeah, I mean, I've come to love low poly, and then, and I loved how it got then around the breathing orb and around the weapon construction. They took it out of the low poly and kind of gave you this contrast in these moments. There's a lot of really neat thoughts that went into the art, and I'm certainly so proud to be working with these folks. They're kind of just out of this world.
Oh, I can't wait to try it. Yeah, I love that you embrace low poly. So there's this great book called Understanding Comics. Have any of you read Understanding Comics? Scott, maybe you could share a link in the chat. It's one of our favorite books, like top 5 recommended. And it's all about how simple art leaves room for your imagination, pretty much. And that's so true of low poly. It's a different kind of visual stimuli. And I think it's part of why Minecraft was so successful. I mean, it's brilliant game design. You can't just copy Minecraft, but that environment has so much room for your imagination because it's not filling things in. And that's an interesting design principle. Ryan, I have to ask though, can we get really nerdy for a moment about game mechanics?
Sure.
Because I want to understand to the extent you do the connection in your game between specific game mechanics and memory reconsolidation.
Okay. Understanding now that what we go into is still theory based, right? I mean, there's
okay. I want to hear it.
And I think you and I talk about this a lot. We're going to all of us that are talking here today will probably be senior or not on the planet by the time we can all put this together in a way that is fully understood. So we have the intrinsics behind what's going on. Again, is this idea of getting you into a heavily engaged state, vagal nerve stimulation, as well as other levels of stimulation, while we push for immediate and long-term achievements as well. So one of the things about rhythm is not only is it a really good way for building entrainment and engagement, but as an example, the rhythm mechanic also, it slows you down and puts you into a certain pace as well, right? And so scoring on accuracy, scoring on precision, these sorts of things are great counterbalances to motion while we're giving you things to navigate and move the way through. So, and what's really cool is Jeff's made a lot of this accessible. The 4 major extrinsic mechanics are, the breath mechanic, are a rhythm mechanic, and a precision mechanic, and motion mechanics, and all of that is being measured, and it's being doled out in a way to try to put you in the most optimal space you can be in to have sort of immediate relief and then to push towards this entrainment. But beyond that, like I said, there's a lot that's going on with, I mean, the level of visual spatial interference that's in place, the interrelation between that level of play is some of the most clever design, when we ask you to make a sound, which means when we ask you to breathe, how we ask you to do that in concert with, you'll notice as you play through the levels, and he continues to work the level design. And I mean, I think I mentioned this before, but I'm going to back up and say this. We've had such an active participation since the beta was live that we're going to end up with a bunch of our players in our credits. So we've,
perfect.
They've been coming back. I mean, there was a little confusion because you could get the game as early as the beginning of May. And people were like, look, there's a launch. And it came out. And there was actually a few people like, this doesn't seem done. It was like, it's not done. We literally, and I think this is Jeffrey saying being amazing. You know this more than I know this. And I've learned this working with game designers for a couple of years. You're only as good as your last title. And there's a lot of judging, even if you're someone like Jeffrey, who's, literally changed mobile marketing, 50 titles, women's mobile gaming. Jeffrey has such big credits for and all that. And Covet Fashion Design Home, some of the places you guys work together, those are now multi-billion-dollar franchises. So he's, but you're always as good as what you've done. But this bravery to push forward, when he looked at this combination of mechanics, what I loved, Amy Jones, he said, I don't know how this is going to feel. We had play tested and moved in, and we'd also done the kind of testing we needed to do for our initial submission with the agency. We had gone through all that, but we just didn't have hundreds, right? We are a small team. We're not, funded with tens of millions and everything. Matter of fact, a lot of this team has volunteered a ton of their time to put this in place. So he was like, we can't do anything better than go live. and he listened really carefully to things, and we learned much more, and he started to deeply turn the mechanics in more. And that's not over. It's out now, and this is our big announcement day. But he's not going to stop, you know. Like, I've never seen anybody more responsive to their players. It's just out of this world. I mean, he's a, you know, he can't sleep if he thinks that there's something that can be better that hits the masses, you know. So the
Right.
interrelation between that, the motion, the rhythm, the breath mechanic, and also those levels of, he set up your levels of achievement. So you can have momentary achievements, which are really important, right? Mastery. And if you look at these things that are tied to stress and calm, distraction, um, agency, having your choices, accomplishments, these sorts of things, um, as well as then the nerve stimulations and the reconsolidation memory, all of those come together to supercharge one another. And he's been balancing that. And then he's done the game balancing. This is what I was getting at. He's still doing it. He kind of takes you through these emotional highs and lows. So you have these times where you're literally dancing in the thing. He's got you moving, you're bopping, you're moving. I only dance. I got to look the silliest of anybody on the planet. I'm humming and dancing and flipping around, but I feel like $1,000,000. And then all of a sudden I'm swarmed in. But as I'm swarmed in, you know, he seems to, I think and I know he's doing this, but I don't know how much. He's dynamically tuning the enemies to show up relative to how well you're doing, and have these moments where you're just ready to conquer and you have the highest likelihood of doing it. And that's the time that you've gotten the best sync that you possibly could have. So that kind of work is out of this world. Like, just, you know, it's next level. I've learned more about behavioral science getting near gamers than I ever, not that I didn't learn from all the great docs we worked with in light therapy, neurostim, certainly. We had a lot of folks that were, you know, around that, other products we did for mental health, but this has been the most patently interesting study in human behavior I've ever been part of. And you guys are, I mean, game designers, I think you might be the best functional behavioral scientists on the planet.
We try.
You know,
It's
it blows
but
my
Jeff, I
mind.
mean, Jeff, the thing that's so cool about that story to me is it really expresses the sort of game design god status. So there's a lot of game designers in the world, and I train a lot of wannabe game designers that want to, apply it to digital therapeutics and education and manufacturing, etc. And a lot of people that are game designers, they've designed one or two games and that's what they know. And they'll take what they know from that and apply it to other games. And there's a lot of game genres. And then some people deeply understand how to craft engaging progression systems, which is what you were just talking about. That kind of tuning where you have the enemies be tied to how well you're doing. That's table stakes for like games like Halo. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
So that's a certain kind of progression design. It's a sophisticated kind of progression design.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of sprinkling points on something, right?
That's right.
It's very sophisticated. It's not always necessary. It's sometimes necessary, but God level game designers like Jeff, or game devs, because he does so many different roles, understand how to gather their bag of tricks and deploy it strategically as needed. And that's just, I love working with people like that. I have some of that quality. Mostly I see it in my mentors and the people I've worked with. But that's really, like when you're talking about your players, one thing that is kind of my motto is your beta players are your co-creators if you do it right. That's why they show up in the credits, but you can't just listen to them and do what they say. That's a noob move.
That's right.
That's a noob move. And a lot of people do that. And then they're like,
it's amazing how much
you have to
so
translate
open.
it.
Yeah, he's so open to that feedback. But then he comes back, he's like, okay, I've thought about it. And we're going boom, 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 boom.
Yes.
And then he becomes open again. He watches and observes again. The first person that I got introduced to in games that showed me this across the board was Lauren Lanning. Like, he was early inspirational to this work. And he, all of that time on the Oddworld franchise, he has spent so much time, going through technological shifts and changes and all this. And he constantly was looking to build these experiences that people were so emotionally attached to. I mean, his characters are literally tattooed on people, think about that. When you get to that level of emotional engagement, exactly. And, I got some time, not as much time, but I mean, the guys, and I got some amazing time with the guys that did Wizard 101. They actually came and hung out with me. And I was like, we compared notes on, you know, Todd and Joseph, who are, I mean, they're insanely capable. And they literally took me through all of the different player motivations, and we were mapping that back to therapy, because we did this years ago. And again, this is all like, when I'm saying we've had amazing people show up, and that was volunteered in their time and looked at how they could help and all that kind of stuff. And Tom Hall was another one. I didn't get as much time with him, but he's, someone we've been back and forth with. Matt Daly is another one that just, that showed up. And and then we've had some of our guys too. Laurent Levine. So he was special effects for freaking The Matrix. He's in there. If you like some of the dazzling stuff you're seeing, that's him. And it's just, and then graphically as well. Mick Buckmiller, who was with Bungie for a long time. I mean, these guys. I mean, and this is, I think what happens is they run in packs, right? The guys you call the godlike folks, they want to be together. And I think Jeff led it. The thing he said to me that was really amazing, he's like, my life changed when he came off console. He said, he had Jeff's had the career of a game designer. Not everything has been roses. And this thing he said to me was amazing. This is true of the therapy design as well. It's like, I really had to dig deep in understanding this when I stopped designing games for me. Right. In the beginning, I think, and Shahid is the same way. I mean, Shahid's been designing, since the Commodore 64. He was over at Sony. He's really the reason the indie movement ended up at Sony. Shahid is deeply involved with this design. And these are folks that know that they're building an experience for other people's, and they're reaching out to understand that. And I think that once we started mixing up these mechanics, and it was really important for this to feel game like in its entirety, I think one of the bravest things Jeff did was, I don't really know what to do here, so we're going to go ask.
Yeah, and that's God level. Totally.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, and then to watch him, I mean, then think about that. So that was 5 weeks ago. It went out there. I don't think they've put their computers down since. Like, the amount of changes, if you are someone who advanced purchased this and then you go in there today, you're going to find a new game almost. It's, the artwork is still there and the music is still amazing, but all of these different layered levels, things that help you get entrainment going, the way they've layered the audio for entrainment and stuff like that is out of this world.
Amazing. Oh, I can't wait. So one summary that for everyone who's listening to this and thinking, okay, I want to get feedback and I want to be smart and strategic with it. Here's a good rule of thumb. Your players and your customers are experts on their problem, not on the solution. So when players say, I want a big green button here, if you can figure out what's behind that, which is that I can't find this functionality, you as the designer, your job is to solve that in a way that works for your whole system. So often players' suggestions for solutions might not be right. Some of them might be right. But what you really need to do is understand the problem they're running into and then solve it with your team.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm sure that's the backroom stuff that goes on for someone like Jeff behind collecting the feedback and then doing that. So I hope that's helpful. We've only got 15 minutes or so, but I really want to focus now on the wonderful folks who are here with us. We have a really active chat with a lot of questions. So I think we're just going to try and take them in order. I see that there was an early question from Sharon about gender. You had a couple of questions, Sharon. Would you like to say hello and ask your question yourself?
Sure. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
So great to get to meet you. This is great. Yeah, I have so many questions. I think the first one I tossed on there was about gender. If there are any gender associations with the shoot 'em up games? Like, is this
That's a
therapeutic
great question.
appropriate for men versus women, or equally, or like?
Well, I mean, so first of all, we all get painted with, the pink and blue brushes early in life, right? And so it turns out that on the surface, it does look, there's some studies that are pointing to the idea that for women, more of the puzzling type games and stuff like that are maybe more effective in some of the stress relief. But then there was a rephrasing and a re-looking at some of that. And it turns out uh, women like shooters too. Everybody likes that they like that feeling. There's a very intrinsically good feeling about sort of the bop and the motion and the timing and the rhythm to that. And so we found that it sort of across the board, that once we got over the stigma of it being a shooter, right, that conversation, and people got in it and realized, well, I'm wielding magic and stuff like that, people really enjoyed the mechanic across the board. But statistically speaking, it skews a little bit more male on most of the data, and then some new stuff coming out is starting to find that women like shooters. They maybe just don't admit to it as often.
Fair. And then we're not going to have time for all of these, but just wondering if you could comment on just covariates around making the game efficacious. So are there other hypotheses around, like, if you use the EMDR pattern where, think about something stressful, then go play this game almost as a prescription, does that help even more?
So that's actually something we're looking at yes, I believe that visualizing on that, but I also believe that I think there's kind of two versions of this. When you're limbically looking for that little limbic entrainment, so that's the thing that just happens because it off of stimulus when it happens. I think that doesn't have to be so contextually bound. But if you're somebody that's dealing with specific stressors, I don't think it's that hard to think about. We actually had suggestions at various points that people could put in their stressors, and we were going to change the shape of the race to some of the things that you were. And here's a really interesting thing that is in there that is contextualizing that already. It's another thing that Jeff did that's amazing. You have to call your demons. If you go in the game and you don't start to make a tone, or you don't press the button that sends the orb out to search for your problems, they don't come. You could literally float through a whole level and just listen to the music. And there's something about calling it and having that idea that you've called it forward and now you're coping and dealing with it, that I really love that construct.
That's amazing. That totally threw me off my next question, but I'm going to give somebody else the floor, and I'm happy to come back if there are no other questions, but I feel like I want to give other people a chance.
Thanks, Sharon. Great questions. Yeah, I noticed. Sharon, did you also say that you had EMDR?
Yeah, and it didn't work for me either.
Can you just tell us quickly about that? I'm fascinated by this because I have a friend who swears by it.
Yeah. So in my case, I've been working with a therapist for a long time. We had a really good, strong rapport built up. She was new to this technique and had brought in her mentor, basically, or supervisor to do this. So there was the two of them, and we did a lot of repetitions of the whole technique, and they would kind of look at each other and go like, yeah, it's not working. It's just like, I don't know.
I kind of love that point alone, actually. The idea that, that in the delivery of therapy, the idea that the patient isn't integrally involved. So if it was going to work, that wasn't going to work when they're looking at each other and going, that sense that, again, that perception brings you in. I think that's why games are so awesome at this sort of thing, because you go in unassuming and then they're kind of reaching you, intrinsically. And I think that's way more likely to be successful than follow my finger. You know what I mean? But there was something behind it. And that was the interesting part as well, that the reconsolidation of memories for those people who did. And I think I've seen at least one study that if you had that high degree of perception that the person delivering it was somebody very capable, I think that allowed you to focus less on, is this working, and more on being deeply in the moment of the issue. And I think that's also what made the Tetris study so interesting. These folks were still in the hospital while they were playing 20 minutes. This is a very fresh memory, which made it very possible. They didn't have, and the thing about distraction and visual spatial interference is it shuts down cognition. Like if you're playing Tetris, I can have a quick conversation. How you doing, Sharon? I'm fine. Like, great. I'm like, hey, would you do a little math for me? You're like, come on, I'm playing. You're not going to that level. I'm playing right now. I can't do that. That level of kind of shutting down that level of cognition, it shuts down rumination. It shuts down self-talk. And it seems to, and I want to be clear, when I use the word seems, it's because there's, we're hitting the edge of the boundaries of known, but it seems to be part of that super highway that gets you to adopt something much faster. And
the other thing that jumps to mind is the fact that when you're playing games, you don't have the variable of another person and their judgments, whatever. There's a trust built into a game, right? And because I think about my EMDR session, it's like I really think the breakdown, when I look back on it, my hypothesis is that I just didn't know this other therapist. And I think I was just really shutting down because there was no trust developed at all. This was a brand new stranger. I'm going to some really deep places. And it's just like,
absolutely. One of our, Shahid, who's worked on this so much, who sent a comment at one point, one of our like fabulous, 50-year, 45, 50-year game designer, like he's been doing this since, I guess, 45 years based on his age. He and I just had a conversation yesterday, and in his portions of the design and the stuff he's been working on, he's talked about the intimacy of the environment. And, Amy Jo, that's interesting back in VR too. VR really is a very intimate environment, to the point that we don't love the thought that someone would take a video of us doing VR from the outside, because what we think we look like and feel like and what we look like and feel like could be quite different. But that intimacy in that environment certainly allows people, I think, to be more with themselves in that moment and maybe more vulnerable. And I think that's really interesting.
I remember, can I sneak in one other question?
Yeah, go. And one sec before you do. By the way, we're at time, but Ryan, do you have another 5-10 minutes?
Oh, for sure.
Awesome. If anyone needs to go, no problem. Thanks for being here. You can watch the replay, but stick around if you want. We have time for some more questions. And I see there's some more in the chat. Go, Sharon.
Just wondering about other sensors, because you mentioned 4 data points that you're collecting at all times to help tune the game. But if they're like dreams about working with other types of biosensors?
Well, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to tell you why. So my career is not in game design. It's in therapy design. It's in building machines and robotics that have been used for surgeries and light therapy and neurostimulation and stuff like that. I'm doing this work now about accessibility and affordability of care. And so I think that we're underestimating the simple sensors that are around us everywhere and how far they can go. We're getting motion, distraction, visual stimulation, simulation, and biofeedback all packed into something that we could do in a mobile phone, that we can do in a headset. And that's where I feel like our DeepWell's job is to just catch you wherever you are. And we want to reach 3 billion people that game. In my world, in medical device, you're lucky if you have 100,000 of your things implanted in somebody, you're at superstar status, right? And that's both, that just tells you sadly about the extent and the reach that's available. So we are trying to keep it as simple as possible. I do really like the PSVR2s, and they've got those. They start with an M. I'm going to say it wrong, but Mopoly, and they attach to the arms and the legs. If those things become more ubiquitous, or they're more, available, we're going to tap into every one of that bit of that sensing we can get. We just don't want to over compel people to purchase. They already got to get a VR headset, and we thought a lot about that. That's why we would love to get things in mobile here once we've got this a little bit more refined. I guess another very honest thing I should say quickly too is mobile's a much more aggressive space to put a thing into, much harder to be discovered. So we lived a little bit in VR today because people could find us, versus the thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of games that are out there otherwise. So we want to reach this accessibility of care as technology moves along. We definitely want to use it, but we want to use the things that are already in your home as much as we possibly can.
Great. Makes total sense. Thank you.
So we have some questions from Hajit. Would you like to ask the question yourself, or would you like me to ask it for you? We would love to invite you to ask if you'd like. Great. Hello, where are you logging in from?
Oh, I know that face. Okay, these are going to be hard questions. This is one of the best occupational therapists I know that uses gaming
For
to do
real?
therapy. So
You're muted, Hajid, so please unmute.
Oh my God, I'm blushing. Thank you.
it is great to see you.
You know,
How
I
are you
had to pop
doing?
in here.
Yeah.
I was asking it in the future, and I'm kind of asking for everyone here too as well, because I feel like it'll be interesting to hear. Will there be different profiles? So, like, let's say if I'm a therapist and I'm looking to having this like reimbursed and filed for this for my client, sometimes you want to trial it out, or someone, might be a little
Mhm.
skeptical, and you're,
Mhm.
having someone there might be a really great way to get ahead of that barrier, because when you talk about VR, unless they are someone who intimately plays with VR, it's kind of like, let
It's
me
a
think
lot
about.
to contemplate, right?
Yeah, it is.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, are you going to see in the future, like, on the screen that you can have multiple profiles? So, like, let's say I trial this with this patient, they're like, let me try a little bit more, but then I have someone else at a different level to see like the progression of things, or will there be a demo available, in the future for someone to get to like past the first two levels for people
Yeah.
to trial it?
I think that's really both. I love that idea that like the professional edition that allows you to save a lot of different books. I'm also really excited. If you guys, I mean, Amy Jo will get this because she knows how games are designed. You will too. When you go in there and see what it's done right now, you're going to realize that these things that we're watching for you are things that we could help you better understand over time too. But there's a lot of work that has to be done around HIPAA compliance and all that sort of thing before we're going to store data. We don't, we are very much recognize that people's data is their data. So it's about building that professional level system and stuff like that. Today, though, I mean, one thing that is true of Meta is you can also buy something and return it. And that is a way. That's the low rent answer to the higher rent thing. I think really what we've done here is put this out to see what people want to use it for and how far they're willing to take it. And while we work to look for other indications for use, to take it into more clinical settings, we're really interested to see how it gets used now. We've already been approached. Some people want to study it independently. That's freaking amazing. Like all that stuff. We're
I
super
can't wait
excited to
to
see
read these
what you're.
studies.
Yeah. I mean, the initial the initial study work, like the meta study that was done and stuff like that around the breath mechanic was amazing. And the med sci team looked at, oh my God, so many different forms of breathing mechanics until they landed on ones that had this sort of
Yeah.
most ubiquitous nature, highest likelihood of working. The fact that it had to be guided, like they were, so that was an amazing meta study. Over 800 studies we went through to consolidate and come up with that. Like it was an immense amount of work. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing some of this, some of this more clinical stuff that shows up. It's just a one step at the time thing. I mean, we had
Yeah.
it out, we had to get it to here. We had dialogue with the agency and had to land at a place that they were comfortable with stress going the way it's going right now while we work with them for other indications for use. So we've got a lot we're doing, but ideas like that are exactly what we need, right? And
Yeah, full disclosure, I had the opportunity to play this. And it's very interesting because with video game therapy, we talk about a flow state, the just right challenge and everything. It really leans into that. If you have the opportunity to try it out, I would say to definitely try it out and give feedback.
you've got to get back in there today. It is 10x. I'm telling you, JT has worked a magic in there at the moment. I couldn't get this
You guys
stupid
get back
grin off
in.
my face yesterday. Like, and it really is. And again, we're not done. We're going to keep doing it too. But he's got a list of things to do. But wow, does it feel good?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. And I know this will be recorded, but I would love to just continue to share. This overall was a great, what's the word? A great talk about also like level design. And I love how you guys touched upon how like great level designers are like when it comes to like behaviorally studying players,
Mm-hmm.
it's phenomenal. So thank you so much for that.
Cool. That's
Thanks
Amy
for
Jo's
being
thing,
here.
man. She is a rock star when it comes to this.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. So thank you everyone for being here. We had so much fun today. We really just scratched the surface. Every time I talk to you, Ryan, I'm like, we need to do this again.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I think about calling you, I think about the time we were going to do a 20-minute call, and 2 hours later, I'm like, well, that's half a Saturday.
Yeah, inspiring friends for the win,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, one thing to mention is that for anyone that's interested in applied game design and how you turn your players into your co-conspirators and creators, and how in particular you use low fidelity to do that, I'm teaching a class, starts Monday, and we have 2 spots left.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of people have been signing up for that. So, I mean, everything we've been talking about here today is exactly what I think you're going to be touching on. A lot of, if you guys end up liking Zengence, or you like at least the trajectory we've taken it, this is very much these methods. It started, very basically with one mechanic. We worked that thing in its entirety, built on it, and we very much looked at player journey. And what I do typically in my work, we talk about patient journey all the time, and storyboarding that out is a really important part. So
The patient journey. Amazing. So oh yeah, thank you, Scott. So I'm gonna let you go, Ryan. This will be up in edited form in a few weeks, but you all got to hear it first. Thank you for being here. Ryan, thank you for having the grit and fortitude to do the iteration needed to get this out into the world. That is no small thing.
let me stop
Congratulations on
yeah.
launch day.
Thank you so much. Let me stop and just be clear one more time. There's been over 100 folks, most of which have volunteered their time. In the world of building a video game, we've raised relatively small dollars. The people, I mean, from the venture capitalists who showed up, obviously I contributed, but then other people showed up. So dollars for things that, where we don't know where the market is in its entirety, by people that want to do something about what's going on with mental health. And then the amount of people that showed up from the game community, the amount of people that showed up from the medical community, and then all the operational folks. I mean, there's a whole bunch of back end to making a game go to that these people don't pop up, but you don't see them all day long. The beta testing and stuff like that. Our Heralds and our Jamies, Cody, our audio therapist, who did amazing audio level designs and concepts and stuff like that. There's been so many people to bring this together, and I'm just kind of blown away, and I'm very appreciative, but I'm also just blown away to get to play with these folks.
It's a team sport.
Yes. Amen.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Ryan. I think I'm going to go play this game.
I would love that.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.